Welcome, everyone. Today is going to be something different. We're going to have Brent Lee on here. We're going to have a discussion. Brent Lee's got his own YouTube channel. I'll let him promote himself in a second. But he is an ex-conspiracy theorist, and now he devotes his channel to trying to focus on countering the disinformation that we're seeing spread and causing a load of manufactured chaos through society today. Would you like to expand on any of that, Brent?
Yeah, hey, what's up? I am Brent Lee TV on YouTube and Twitter. I am an ex-conspiracy theorist of 15 years. Basically, a lot of people think a conspiracy theorist is just someone who believes JFK was shot by multiple people or something like that, but I more like identified as a conspiracist, where the whole worldview was a conspiracy, basically. If I was still a conspiracist today, I probably would be somewhat QAnon adjacent, even though I probably wouldn't be happy with the right-wing influence on it. But that's pretty much what I did believe in. And now I'm trying to show people how I was wrong, which might help other truthers or conspiracists to see how they could be wrong. That's kind of just what I do.
Cool. And I think that's very, very noble, because there's a lot of people that they're not inclined to kind of hold their hands up and say, hey, I made a mistake. It's kind of one of those things where there's people who believe in conspiracies that are completely wrong and harmful, not only to themselves, but to society at large. And there's people who just believe everything that they're told from the mainstream media. And obviously conspiracies can't exist. But even though once you get two people in a room conspiring together and then they come out and act on that kind of chat that they've had, that is inherently a conspiracy. And especially if it goes under the radar and isn't reported on, it basically, conspiracies exist. The thing that we're both kind of looking into now with the COVID pandemic, there's lots of similarities between the protests in the UK, in Holland, Netherlands, Germany, Australia, America, and to have those similarities and not think that there's some global organization that is pushing these protests forward and not calling that a conspiracy in regards to the way that it's happening is just a kind of, it's too far to the other way of just, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, go get your tinfoil hat on. It's like, no, there is a global conspiracy, and we just need to separate what is a conspiracy theory from the conspiracy fact.
Yeah, well, like, I've got a bad relationship, obviously, with the word conspiracy because of where I come from my journey, basically. And, you know, I like to call what's going on, like, I guess what I've watched your videos, like what you're saying about a global conspiracy is what I call corruption. Yeah. I try to just stick to saying corruption, because then people can't call me a conspiracy theorist anymore, because I'm not into the conspiracy. To me, conspiracies is like Illuminati, stuff like that, you know, the things that I did like wholeheartedly believe in. But I believed in that because of the corruption that was and is present still, you know, that. And I think like focusing in on showing the corruption and kind of just dropping the word conspiracy for myself has actually like been a very positive move. People that kind of take you a little bit more serious. But I only find that for myself because I used to speak about conspiracies all the time, you know? So I think there's a distinction to be made. Like, let's call out, you know, I feel like calling out corruption. It's a better message, you know?
I agree. But I think there might be some gray area. So have you watched my work on the silent vigil yet at Clapham Common?
No, I've seen you reference it in some of your other videos.
So I would say that you could kind of argue that it is corruption, because a lot of the people that were involved in that are either fans, supporters of Boris Johnson, his friends, for instance, to call it. But I think there was a conspiracy, and they managed to, the people who were responsible for the events that night, people like Piers Corbyn and people Haikuku and characters from Speaker's Corner that like I've spoke to, many of them face to face, they obviously conspired in a way to use that event to promote their anti-lockdown agenda and following protests the following week. So I think corruption in that specific example might not be the perfect word for it.
Co-option.
Yeah,
like that's co-optive and coercive movements and that. But I do get that what you're saying, like the definition of conspiracy is like what's going on.
It's just that it's been tainted,
yeah,
the word.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do find that there is, I think there's global corruption, and then there's like small conspiracies. And one of like the groups of conspiratorial people are like these neo-reactionaries.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. When I heard David Curtin's name come out of your mouth, I was like, yes, you do know, like he's important to be speaking about, And
it's these types of people that would otherwise be known as part of like the New World Order, in my opinion, but they use phrases like the New World Order to kind of point at other shadowy figures that are more traditionally kind of believed to be like a Jewish cabal, for instance, when that isn't the case. There's no conspiracy of just Jewish people. What it is mostly white men who are using these conspiracies of old to misdirect from their own conspiracy that they are kind of taking part in and using, just to gaslight the nation, spread as much as chaos as possible, control the narratives of like the zeitgeist of what's been pushed on the media. And they're even getting themselves platformed on the media as like honest actors in some circumstances, especially like I say with the silent vigil. There was many like there was a guy who goes to Dover to film like refugee boats and complain about how we're being invaded. He got his say on Huffington Post. There's a guy from Speaker's Corner who's a Tommy Robinson supporter who got his say on LBC, and it's very difficult to kind of really understand how that happens.
Do you think that's because the Overton window has shifted? Because like it seems like the more right you get, like it's more acceptable, and then the tiniest little bit of progressive that you are, all of a sudden you're a communist. Like say someone you or me are just like just proper lefties or something. We're the furthest left you could ever get.
Yeah, that's possibly part of it, but within the silent vigil, like there was a guy called Haikuku, where I'd released a video when Tommy Robinson came to Speaker's Corner. Haikuku, being a Marxist, was like opposed to Tommy Robinson. Like, I'm not sure if he was opposed to him being there, but he was definitely opposed to what he was saying. And he got assaulted by some Tommy Robinson fans and spent the day or the night in jail as the police arrested him, thinking that it was his fault for his assault. And then to see him a few months later riling up this crowd at the silent vigil and then handing his megaphone to Steve from Speaker's Corner, who is a Tommy Robinson fan, it's like, whoa, there's now these two people that were originally opposed to each other. One of them got arrested for opposing kind of the other, and then all of a sudden now they're working together. I mean, if that's not a conspiracy, I don't really know what is. How did that come to part? How did they suddenly speak to each other and come to terms with their differences, and then start working together to radicalize this event in effect? And then the following week, he was stood surrounded by a load of Tommy Robinson supporters that I recognized, and he was doing a speech where they were all fucking loving him. He was like, yay, great stuff, like, hi cuckoo, you're the one, and all that kind of stuff.
That's really
so,
that's confusing.
yeah, like when I saw it, it was like my whole worldview had just shattered, because hi cuckoo was one of the few people at Speaker's Corner that I actually enjoyed listening to. And then to see him just flip like that, it was like, well, something's going on here, and I need to figure this out. And as a conspiracy fact, before it becomes history, and then I'm just chatting about some conspiracy theory gone by that everyone just like, oh, go on, Lister, put on your tinfoil hat and that kind of thing.
I don't think that stuff is it warrants any kind of tinfoils or anything. It's just conspiracy is far out there. If you need a tinfoil hat, it's something that, you know, most likely isn't true.
Well, yeah,
it probably has no basis in actual truth.
Absolutely. It's just very easy to like dismiss. So this video that I made about the vigil pretty much accounts for everybody's movements. It goes through the whole evening in about 2 hours, and it's just unquestionable, the evidence that I've put forward. But because it's 2 hours long, because it has to be that, so I can basically preserve the record. It's very easy just to dismiss it, and I've had it from people in the mainstream media and elsewhere, just calling me a conspiracy theorist, and like people specifically involved that I went to Speaker's Corner like afterwards and challenged them on their behavior. They started questioning my mental health as if I was seeing things. It's like, dude, it's on video. You just can't do that. Like, you're the one who obviously needs to check your mental health, because you can't remember what you were doing that night, clearly.
Mm.
So what was the moment that changed your mind on this topic? Was there a specific event that turned you away from conspiracy theories?
No. The easiest answer is no. The thing is, when you're not a lifelong, but, you know, 15-year long into some ideology, it's never really one thing that gets you out. You know, it wasn't one thing that got me in, so it wasn't one thing that got me out.
So there's a pipeline in. For you, there was a pipeline in and there was a pipeline out.
Yeah. Now, getting out was a long journey. Basically, fully, let's say it's about 6 years, from 2012 to 2018. The first 3 of those years is me disagreeing with a lot of kind of the conspiracy truth movements that were coming up around that time. So there was stuff to do with Sandy Hook and Boston Marathon bombings, Pulse nightclub shooting, things like that. And there was a narrative like spun, like everyone knows about this today, crisis actors, you know, where the people involved aren't actually really victims, they're just actors. Now that stuff wasn't around when I started. When I started, people died for the reason, you know, for terrorism, but state-sponsored terrorism. But this crisis actor thing, like, it didn't sit right with me, especially with the Sandy Hook parents. I didn't like it. It's really distasteful, but I just thought, okay, everyone's just got it a bit wrong.
The kind of people who were pushing that crisis actor thing would have been people like Alex Jones.
Yeah.
And the way I would see it is, like, I've done a video on the psychopathy of far-right politics, and in that video, that basically talking about the behaviors of psychopaths and how you can see those behaviors from a collective that is government. So one of the behaviors is projection, and Tommy Robinson does this a lot. Everything he complains about is something that he is responsible for, or he does himself, and that's called projection. And Alex Jones, I would say, he is the crisis actor. He has been to court and he's called himself, oh, I'm just playing a character. Like, this isn't real. That's just a persona that I play on TV. And then that makes him the crisis actor, spreading these false stories and these conspiracy theories. And so there is this kind of gray area that I think there's a lot of people involved in this that are wannabe actors, and they might get approached by people with dark money, and there was two YouTubers that were approached in the same way, saying where they were asked, hey, you can carry on doing what you're doing, we'll pay you some money, but can you just drop some kind of anti-mask or anti-vaccine or anti-lockdown kind of messaging in your videos? And they refused and blew the whistle. There is this kind of idea of this dark shadowy network and think tanks and that kind of thing, but it's not this new world order of that has the connotations of anti-Semitism and that kind of thing.
It's not actually the big powerful people. It's not George Soros. It's not people like that. It's these other people that want to take over and actually create a new world order. They want a dictatorship.
Yeah,
they're happy with that. They don't believe in democracy because they don't trust us, basically, to run ourselves. They think they're smarter than us. Dominic Cummings is a perfect example of that.
And they say these things with their own mouths, like Peter Thiel, democracy and freedom aren't compatible is one of his beliefs. But what that really means because I would say I'm a bit of a libertarian. I think to be a libertarian and to want freedom, you can't just want freedom for yourself and expect that to expect you to be able to then exploit the freedom of others for your own benefit. Exploitation of others is not a libertarian position, in my opinion. That's an authoritarian position, because you're not protecting freedoms of others. You're not a libertarian. You're only a libertarian for yourself, which is authoritarian. So I can do what I want, but you can't, because you don't have the power to. And that's basically so.
On them political compass tests, I come under that, like a social libertarian. Where I've got quite socialist views, but also very like libertarian views. Same thing.
And this libertarian title has been taken over by people like what's his name, Dave Rubin, and and billionaires like Peter Thiel, who just think, oh, classical liberal, like Ayn Rand economics, anyone can make money, anyone can be a billionaire, not realizing that the more someone soaks up that money, they don't have to put that money back through the economy. They're just stockpiling it. And there's a finite amount of money until the banks create more, which then causes inflation and all sorts of other kind of like things that aren't very good for a stable kind of functioning economy and society in general. So you can't point to a single event.
Yeah,
Can you
shall I
point to
continue with
some?
that bit?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That'd be
okay.
great.
So there's the crisis actors, and then, like I said, it's just I started disagreeing with a lot of the conspiracies that were coming up at that time. There was like flat Earth, there was Mandela effect, there was like trans agenda, and Michelle Obama's really a man, and all this like dumb shit, basically. And I really just I wasn't feeling it. So there's all of that, and then I'm a Christian myself, right? And I believed that, you know, these terrorist attacks basically were sacrifices, you know, to Lucifer and stuff like that. But the more I got pissed off with the truther movement, I started researching more into my religion. And basically I came to a point where I realized there is no such thing as hell. So what else am I wrong about here? If there's no hell and Satan's not as powerful as like these fundamentalists are trying to make him out to be, then there's no mass ritual sacrifice. Like, that none of this is real. I came to find out stuff about the mark of the beast, 666, Book of Revelation being about Emperor Nero and not about a coming Antichrist. All things like that really made a lot of those like spiritual conspiracy beliefs crumble, you know? And then, like, say 2015 to 2018, the worldly stuff, like, none of it came to pass. All the things that I had been thinking would come to pass for so many years, none of it happened. In fact, the opposite happened. Somehow this Trump guy turns up. Somehow Brexit happens. And God knows what happened, how Jeremy Corbyn took control of the Labour Party for a bit. Like, this stuff was unreal. You know, never in my wildest dreams did I think that shit would happen in a new world order. It just wouldn't. And so by 2018, I'm done with it. And I just need to take some time and figure out what the hell's going on in my head. And so from then till now, I've just been starting afresh, you know, and trying to think what's real, what isn't real. And 3 years later, now I'm into doing this basically.
So did you start making videos straight away, or did you take some time out before?
I took 2.5 years off. Didn't do anything, but I was okay. Like, obviously the pandemic hit, 2020. I saw lots and lots of the conspiracy stuff rising up again, talking about this, and basically, you know, here we are now. Millions of people have died from it, and conspiracies did that. And then January 6th happened, and Ashley Babbitt was shot dead in the Capitol building during the insurrection. And I looked at that, and me and my fiance looked at each other, and we were like, a few years ago, that could have been us. I looked at her, I was like, that could have been you. I could have been stood right next to you and just watched you get shot in the neck because we believed pedophiles ran the government. You know, we believed that stuff. And that day, I thought, I need to talk about this. I need to, like, not turn my back on the truther community and try and help them come out of this, because I've learned so much stuff since I've left, and they need to hear this. They need to come out too. And 6 months ago is when I logged back onto Facebook. I told everybody that I'm not the person that you used to know, and here's my videos. And I just started making them then.
Yeah, that's really good. That's because the way I got into this was basically just starting going to far right protests to speak to people who were probably in a similar position to you, but instead of being in this conspiracy theorist kind of network, I was going into the Tommy Robinson protests where they just have all this kind of incorrect information on what the vast majority of Muslims believe. They just believed that they believed that Muslims were like them, and they were projecting their own insecurities and fears onto the people that they opposed. And to get people to recognize that, like now I'm still, it's very difficult for me to go to these protests, so I've got to kind of choose my moments kind of wisely. But I was in London a few weeks ago, and a person was live streaming, and I tried to wait till he was finished live streaming and had a chat with him, and was basically like, look, this could be you. The insurrection, which is what these people, these anti-lockdown, anti-vaccine people want, they're Pied Pipers. Like they literally say it on camera, and like you don't even need to hear them say it on camera, because the behaviors of that crowd with their Trump flags and Mike Flynn hats and QAnon kind of conspiracy kind of infected the whole thing, like almost the whole thing. It just leads to an assault on our own democracy. And yeah, I think it's very important to make people aware that, hey, you are just a foot soldier as a distraction from the people kind of pushing this nonsense, and you won't get anything out of it. You'll just lose your own mental health. You might get locked up, and once you have no use to these people anymore, you'll be forgotten. And like it's very important, I think, to end in order to end the gaslit nation. We can't just go around with the idea of bash the fash and like just have this culture war that is just going to end in more kind of heartache and hurt and more confusion and more hatred between groups. We just need to have this radical empathy where it's like, okay, you can let out your anger on me, but it's not going to affect the way that I'm going to it's not going to change the way I treat you. I'm still going to be here. I'm still going to try and tell you what's real and what's not real, and I'm still going to do it from a position of caring about you, because at the end of the day, there's people who are just intent on soaking as much up from our society just for their own benefit. And we've seen that through the government's response to COVID, giving their like contracts to all their friends, and they don't care about the people pushing on the streets who are basically the foot soldiers being trained up. Like I've heard people say, like, we're not ready to take storm Parliament. It's like, dude, do you want to do that? Do you want to be the foot soldier for these people who are then going to potentially take MPs hostage, and you're going to be the one who gets into trouble for it? It's not just a little party where you go and like have fun in Parliament for a day. Like, no, it's serious business.
Everyone wants that V for Vendetta moment, though, don't they?
Yeah, I want it, but
like, we all want justice. We all want it to stop. We want the corruption to end. But hold on, guys, we don't want violence. That's what I would say.
And we don't want to be led into it through, especially, yes, we don't want violence, especially, I want to echo that. And we also can't be led into it by powerful figures with lots of money that are being backed by the very people who don't want democracy in the first place. They don't want to overthrow the current people controlling our democracy. They want to overthrow democracy for an authoritarian state.
Yeah,
I want to change the system as it is, and have us all, no matter what your politics, involved in a citizens' assembly where we can have, it's basically like a trial where you get the experts in, they say, hey, in this country they do this, in this country they do this. It doesn't work well here, but it work. But an alternative is this in this country, and it works great. And then once everyone's been informed of the potential solutions and the positives and negatives for each of them, then we can make a decision, just like we have a jury in a trial. If we can do that in a court and a safe and secure setting where the jury can't be manipulated by big money, whether it be through news propaganda and social media and Cambridge Analytica and the way that they kind of analyzed our thoughts and fears and behaviors, and then peppered us with bespoke adverts in order to kind of control, to kind of make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. If you can just kind of separate all that toxicity out of democracy, have this citizens' assembly where, there's an example in Ireland where for decades, politicians refused to act on the abortion issue because it could have been the end. If they got the decision wrong, it could have been the end of their political career. So the politicians' ego got in the way of kind of doing anything, and they just kind of always put this on the back burner. And then they had a citizens' assembly. The citizens came back to the politicians and said, this is what we want to happen. It was popular in the whole of the nation. And so the politicians did it, and they were able to do it because they knew that then they had the backing of the citizens. And yeah, like basically people are getting turned off from democracy because of the way that we're not represented. And I think a more inclusive thing like a jury service, citizens assembly would go a long way to fix that, especially if we just had one for political reform. It would just change our society so much for the better. And we can't, and for me, it's all about not allowing the billionaires to create this new system in their own eyes. And especially from what I've learned from the past 2 or 3 years, learning about this neo-reactionary ideology, they are quite intent on denying global warming, denying that there's going to be a climate catastrophe, even though they know that it will happen, and that they know that it will cause mass chaos through people not being able to grow the crops that they used to. So there'll be mass starvations, sea levels will rise, so coastal cities, all the populations in coastal cities will have to move. There will just be this massive refugee crisis. And while the billionaires and the elites are building bunkers and apocalypse technology, like Musk has said himself, I want to be at the forefront of apocalypse technology. It's like, well, we shouldn't really have someone like you with being the richest man in the world and being able to kind of spread this information, which is just basically confusing everyone to the point where there's just like chaos everywhere.
Yeah,
like go on.
I was just going to ask, because like you said, neo-reactionaries. What's the distinction though here between like what's called the neo-reactionaries and like alt-right?
So alt-right would be the umbrella term. I think alt-right was a moniker that kind of came out following the Gamergate thing.
Yeah.
You know about Gamergate?
Milo came up with that, didn't he? Didn't he coin alt-right?
Yeah, I think so. Basically, it's this umbrella term for anyone who's kind of anti-women, how it started with Gamergate, into QAnon, or it's just this kind of alternative version of the far right that doesn't just include racists. So you can be a member of the alt-right without really like hating on Black people or Jewish people or Muslims or that kind of thing. The NRX specifically they don't need to be a big group. They are specifically, so the way I see it is Antifa are a group, or anti-fascists are a group that want to conserve the community and protect the community and remove any kind of toxic kind of people from that community. Whereas the opposite of that is this NRX. It's not an organization that you join. It's a loose network of people with cells in different places. And this NRX network isn't just far right, it's ultra authoritarian. So it can sit on the left and the right. So you get this kind of, they would like to see themselves as part of the cognitive elite who are authoritarian in all sections, from communist to capitalist, far right. So that's why you see Haikuku as a Marxist working with like Tommy Robinson supporters as fascists. And that's what makes that make sense. And this idea of a cognitive elite was prescribed by Jacob Rees-Mogg's father in a book called Sovereign Individual. And that book was very influential for Peter Thiel and his idea that democracy and freedom aren't compatible, which is basically, he means billionaires and democracy aren't compatible. And if that's the case, democracy and billionaires aren't compatible, then I choose democracy. Like most of the nation, billionaires aren't very popular with the whole nation. And if we had a citizens' assembly, we'd probably put an end to the existence of billionaires through various methods.
So like, alt-right is like a very catchy title to use in like the media. Do you think that like the neo-reactionaries are getting confused for alt-right, like when they get spoken about in the media?
I think because the media are so one of the ideas within neo-reactionary ideology is basically from how to make friends and influence people. You just have to be very passive to the person in power, do what they want, and then gain their respect, and then through that kind of passivity, you're then able to kind of push that person in a certain direction where you want to go to. And then there'll be all sorts of different types of operatives within the NRX. There'll be those people who do that kind of infiltration. Then you'll get the people who are more on the ground level, who are like pushing people into the police at like protests and things, and they're more inclined to be called accelerationists. So yeah, this NRX is basically, they do what they think the powerful in society would want them to do. They would hope that they get noticed by the most powerful in society, and then through that payoff, then once their great reset happens, which is what is written about in their ideology, and how I was able to kind of predict, well, not predict it, but talk about it before the actual World Economic Forum had talked about it themselves. That's basically how I was able to do that. So yeah, like I say, they do the work of the billionaires, creating this chaos. They get noticed, and then they get funded. And I could give you so many kind of examples and case studies on people that's happened to. Like, for instance, there's a band called Jam for Freedom who have been they call themselves the only touring band of the lockdown, and they've helped cause chaos for months on at these anti-lockdown protests, and all of a sudden they get noticed by Steve Bannon, and then they're on his show in his podcast in the war room, and because they got noticed by these powerful people, and then it's like follow, and then they're going up that ladder, that hierarchy of authoritarianism from there.
Mm.
Does that kind of,
yeah,
the NRX is a confusing idea, and it's very difficult to explain in like just a single tweet or even a Twitter thread. And
yeah, no, but it's interesting because like from my like looking into stuff, is like reactionary and populist, like those words kept cropping up a lot, and like looking at the definition of those words, that's kind of what I saw. Almost looking back, almost every single conspiracist that I followed were those people. William Cooper was, Jordan Maxwell is, Alex Jones is definitely, like, he believes that stuff as well. He does put on a bit of an act, but he has grown up like reading John Birch material, John Birch Society material.
Alex Jones.
Yeah, his whole life. These people are like American fascists, and I just didn't really notice it back in the day. Because
do you think he really believes that there was river? What was it that was turning the frogs gay that he believed?
No, he probably doesn't believe that.
Yeah,
no, like I said, he pushes some like crazy stuff. His politics, though, his political views, that's real. And that's what he really thinks. He really is a homophobe. He really is a transphobe.
Yeah,
he is. He's not a white supremacist. I don't think a lot of these people are, like you said, like with the neo-reactionaries, it doesn't really matter, or the alt-right, it doesn't really matter, because I think, I like the term that the Proud Boys use, Western chauvinist. Like the West is the best to them. And if you're from the West, you're in the club. All right.
Yeah.
And screw everyone else. Like that's what these people are. Alex Jones is 100% that.
So another word that the NRX like to call themselves is the Dark Enlightenment. I like to call them I like to call it the Dark Entitlement. And being entitled is another like characteristic of being a psychopath.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, it doesn't matter to them. And that is bang on the money. They just don't care about race. Like they might not be racist, but they don't care about racism. And I think it's more about that lack of care for others and the vulnerable, as opposed to a more overt belief that they're going to act upon because they hate like the other. It's not that they hate the other. They just haven't been given the ability to care due to their own like mental makeup. Maybe maybe they're born with that, or maybe they've been brought up in as a like in an abusive household, or whatever the reason is for their narcissism or psychopathy or sociopathy. That it's those drivers that are more important more important than their kind of political ideologies. Like Hitler and Mussolini, their political ideologies could turn on a dime if it was helpful to them, and they did change their political ideologies. Yeah,
it's just humans, isn't it? Like it's human psychology as well. Like you're either a selfish person or you're a selfless person. Like that is pretty much what we have in the world. Like he can be summed up in those two ways. And politically, that leans to conservative or progressive. You look after your own little circle, or you want to look after everyone. Of the bigger circle, because if you look after everyone, it's looking after you. But it makes sense on their side as well. If you're looking after you're a small like community, they'll look after you too. Like, but this is human psychology, human behavior. You know, it goes back a damn long time.
Absolutely. I think Darren Brown is probably one of the people who is like, to me, he's like a modern day Machiavelli. Machiavelli wrote a book to basically give the population the ability to read the rules that the powerful play by. And I don't think Machiavelli was an authoritarian himself. I think he was pro-democracy, and he challenged, well, he tried to challenge the leaders. I don't think he made that book as a rule book for the people in power. It was more of a, this is the rules that they play by. If you want to challenge that power, you need to understand how they see the world. And I think Darren Brown is like a modern day version of that, where he shows the techniques that the media or politicians or grifters might use to manipulate people, but he does it in a safe and secure way and a fun way. What I call a gullibility test is basically simply described by watching Darren Brown bring someone up on stage or bring a group of people up on stage, look into their eyes and be like, no, you're not probably best for this stunt that I'm going to do. And then he looks into the next person's eyes and it's like, oh yeah, you can do it, and then sleep. And for me, it's just that look into the eyes. You can tell if someone is, well, Darren Brown can tell if someone is just easily suggestible, and then they will fall for whatever scam that he's going to pull off on stage. And if we can understand that no matter how smart you are, we can all be manipulated by one of these people. If you were stood in front of Darren Brown, he would probably be able to tell if you were lying. And if he can tell if you're lying, then he's able to manipulate you in certain ways. There's no shame in being manipulated by these people, but I think what you do great is basically exemplifying that and removing that shame by calling out and holding up your hands and being like, I was there, and now I'm here, and I'm trying to explain how I was manipulated, and in the hope that other people can learn from your mistakes, as opposed to just letting everyone else just fall for the same kind of stuff that you did earlier.
Yeah, it's been hard doing it, but you know, it's worth it at the end of the day. It really is. I've like I said, I've only been doing this for 6 months, but the amount of people that it's sparked up these conversations, you know, and I even like some super hardcore conspiracists are like still paying attention after like a lot of them, like on my Facebook, dumped me straight away. You know, they were gone. They were like, fuck you, I'm out. But there's like these hardcore ones that stuck around, and they still argue, they still do bits, but like, you know, I got one to not believe in the New World Order is a thing anymore. Like they were just like, all right, cool. I think it just means a brand new day. I think you're right. You know, it's not an actual plan or something. You know, just because I've been in that group, some of them will listen. They'll listen more than they'll listen to, you know, back to what we've said before about like some of the experts in the media. Like they're never going to listen to these people. I think, like myself, like I as much as I might have little critiques of certain people, you know, in the mainstream media for not touching on certain things, I still think they're doing a good enough job for who they are. You know, it's people like us that have to kind of do the real hard work. These people just need to report on it.
Yeah,
you know, that's it. The
way I see the media at the moment is a kind of like, they're stuck in this capitalist system where there's only so much news to go around, and they can't be promoting kind of citizen journalists or people who are like on the ground putting in the effort just for like a hobby, because that might then show them up to be, well, this guy doesn't have, well, this guy's got his own job and he's done all this work, and we've got a team of people, and he's done more than us and he understands more than us. It just kind of, it shows them up to be not as kind of, they're not in it for the right reasons, basically. They're just in it for the job and the security.
Yeah, it's true. I think, you know, a distinction I try and make to myself to, like, you know, not get mad about any of it, is that these people know stuff, they just don't quite understand it all. Where I've been, I understand it inside out. You know,
Yeah.
like you were talking about one of the journalists in your video, and you said, she said about climate change now being part of the conspiracy.
Yeah, being
and
the
like
forefront.
you quite rightly pointed out, no, this has been going on for decades. Like all these little things that people, like, you know, they point out is like, no, I know where that comes from. I know who said that first. I know the basis of why we're believing it. Like, have you seen this conspiracy chart that was going around the other day?
The upside down triangle thing.
Yeah, like I got serious issues with that whole chart, and I like Abby. I like, you know, fair play to her for doing what she does, but I just don't like this chart, you know. And I think it's because she knows about stuff, but she doesn't understand it. Like, things are just way out of whack, you know. They're just not in the right positions. So she's kind of making fun out of the Prince Charles is a vampire, but that goes way back to, like, he could either the shape-shifting reptilians, which is supposed to be in the extreme section, you know, or the adrenochrome. It all goes back to the same sorts of things, but it's just out of place. And I don't think a lot of people kind of understand it very much, which is fine. It's absolutely fine. I would prefer that most people don't understand the horrors of the rabbit hole.
I think I have a similar opinion ish. Like the idea that there is these satanic pedophiles like ruling the world, I think is just completely wild and bonkers, and not obviously a conspiracy. However, when you kind of think about Jeffrey Epstein and the amount of powerful people that he had in his black book, and the fact that he got away with his abuse for so long, then I see that satanic pedophiles as the misdirection to confuse everybody and hide from the actual truth that is Jeffrey Epstein and all his powerful mates that he's managed to, like, con into his rooms or into his plane. And then once basically one, and I think anyone is susceptible to this, whether it's from that high up power or whether it's from people on these anti-lockdown movements. There will be people there who are trying to find out your fears, trying to get you sucked into something. As soon as, like, trying to make people put on like a yellow Star of David, for instance. Most people won't even get that connotation or realize that that's anti-Semitic. So then they'll put it on. And then once someone calls them out for it, it's like, well, I'm not anti-Semitic. What are you on about? This is just the badge that I'm wearing because this is what the government wants to do to us. And it's like, yeah, but it is so disrespectful to,
it's
like,
so ignorant.
Jews.
It's so ignorant, really is. It's just it's choosing to ignore the absolute atrocity here. I think that's like something that saved me, right, from not going as far down the like to the right of the conspiracy world, is because, like, I grew up in Germany, for one. So You know, I went to German school for 4 years. My stepfather is in the military. It's a multicultural, multiracial family. You know, there's so many things that put me on the left from the get-go, or wanting an egalitarian society. Anti-racist, definitely never like a Holocaust denier or thinking anything like that, because like I said, I grew up in Germany. I went to the camps when I was younger, looked all around. I went to German school for 4 years. They teach the children about that, so that they never make that mistake again. Like those things, like, you know,
never forget, like we should be doing.
Yeah. And that, like you said, yeah, we should be doing that about colonialism right now. But guess who doesn't want us to learn about that? Then all the people on the far right will be
like, oh, you're anti-white.
Yeah. This thing about the statues, and they're always like, oh, you're just trying to whitewash history. And it's like, no, we're not whitewashing history. We're making history. Yeah. I'm from Bristol. I live here in Bristol, just down the road from when they fell Colston. We were cheering that day so hard, man. We were so happy.
Were you in the crowd?
No, I was here. I was here at home watching on Twitter, like going, oh, yes, cannot believe they're down there. You know, and
the only thing,
and it was so good. And people were like, oh, you're whitewashing history. And I just said, no, we're making history that day.
I mean, you know? Back in the day, I'm not sure if it was the Romans or Greeks or both, but they would have statues of their like leaders, their monarchs, or the people at the top of power of whatever society it was. But as soon as they died, they wouldn't make a new statue for the new leader. They'd redo the statues that were already there and make them look a bit more like the new guy. And sometimes they would change the statues, and they put the old statues somewhere else. And I think that idea needs to be remembered. Like, you can be a statue for that specific time, but as we progress and realize that actually now you're symbolizing something that a lot of people would find offensive, like if they were anti-gay or anti-women or anti immigration or that kind of thing. It's not a very welcoming thing for any one of those vulnerable or groups to see in society that they're supposed to be feeling welcoming in. Mm-hmm. So I think that if you want to keep these statues, sure, but let's put them in like a safe space, like a big field where once the society as a whole votes to remove that statue, don't remove it from the nation altogether. Put it in that safe space where we can go to ourselves and remember the atrocities of the past that they may have been responsible for, and use that place like a museum to never forget. Like, I think that's the kind of halfway ground, instead of just putting them all in the sea or whatever. If you want to then like go to that statue and worship it, then that's on you. You've got the freedom to do that, but you can pay for it, and you can pay at the door for it.
Yeah, well, that was the thing with the Colston statue. Like, it's been a bone of contention for years in this city. There was petitions done. There was so many things, and then like 2 council members were able to turn it over. They were like, no, we're not doing that. They asked for like a little democratic plaque.
Will for it.
No, we're not having the plaque. All of that. It was always asked, like, can we remove it and take it up to the museum, please? That was that. That's all it was ever asked. No one asked for it to be melted down or to be stomped or thrown in the sea or anything like that, But after all these years, on that day, the people of Bristol had enough.
So there was a democratic mandate for that, for the removal of the statue that wasn't acted upon. Yeah. That's what I thought. Yeah, and that just goes to show that politicians who are supposed to rule over us by representation, they're not there to represent us. They're there to represent their egos and the people that pay, like, that sponsor them, and that needs changing. Have you heard of Daryl Davis? A guy called Daryl Davis?
No, I don't think so.
Daryl Davis is a guy from America who kind of embodies what you're now doing, staying friends with people in the conspiracy theory world. You're able to have those conversations on a baseline of, like, you already respect each other because you know each other. So you've got more chance of being able to change people's minds, because there's not that fear or hate or assumption of the kind of person you are, just based on the labels that you like that people will give you. Daryl Davis is a black guy who did the exact kind of same thing with the KKK. He would befriend them, basically show them that, look, you think that black people are all these things. I'm here to show you that I'm not any of those things. And most black people are like me. And there's nothing for you to be afraid of. I'm not here to, like, steal your women or, like, whatever. And then from that friendly basis, he was then able to gain his respect. Well, not like leaders of KKK and other kind of operatives in that movement. Who's able to gain their respect, and to the point where he's then getting up on stage with some leaders of the KKK, and the leader is basically calling out his whole crowd, saying, "You're all worthless." And this black man has got more more about him than any of you. None of you would go to the other side and befriend them in this way. And through that method, Daryl Davis has managed to derobe around 200 KKK members, and he's now got a room in his house where he's just got all their robes kind of like hanging around as some kind of, like, look what I did. And I think that's a really important idea and message and success story that I think needs to be more popular, more realized, so then we can try and fix this polarization of society, where obviously the most powerful in society would like that gap as wide as possible, so then they can use their bread and circuses that they like to play more efficiently. And if we're able just to kind of have this radical empathy like Daryl Davis, bring everyone together, it'll be much more easier to set up that citizens assembly where we can have a revolution or reform or whatever that turns into from that moment.
Yeah, that's a great story. It kind of reminds me, like, just, hey, nowhere near as good as this guy, obviously, but like my friend in New York, Eric, he's he's been doing anti-fascist action for over like nearly 2 decades there, and he sent me a message like when I came out talking about this stuff, and he was like, "I'm really proud of you. I really think debunking conspiracy theories is just as valid, like, anti-fascist action that I've ever done. So I'm so glad that you're out here doing that same thing." And I was struck by that at first. I was like, how is that anti-fascist action? But of course it is, because they're the ones that are really spreading all of this stuff.
Yeah, the idea of anti-fascism is so kind of silenced that I didn't know. I really wasn't aware of the title until like my late 20s, and I studied theology and religious studies in school, A level. So for 2 years, I was studying Islam. Basically, it didn't turn me into a Muslim, which is what all the far right kind of conspiracy theorists like Tommy Robinson protesters think. It's like, oh, they're teaching Islam in our schools. They're trying to push it on people. It's like, no. I was in a class of like 12 people, and none of them turned into a Muslim. Like, what are you talking about?
I know, man, we're both stood here with beards.
what it did do was give me the understanding of what Muslims believe, and that there's really nothing to fear from a Muslim. There's more to fear from an extremist, from either Muslim or Christians or atheists or Tommy Robinson supporters. The extremists are what we need to fear. It's not just your general religious person who.
It's not your identity. It's your ideology.
Yeah. So for like 10 years, from like being 16 to around 26, 27, I was countering the like misinformation on social media around Islam. And I didn't realize that was an anti-fascist action that I was doing for a decade, until I kind of got out of that and moved on to like go into protests, and then realized that, yeah, for all that time I've been anti-fascist, and other people have been anti-fascist doing similar things, and not like these people don't know what it is that they're doing has a name. And if people knew that, they'd be then able to find these networks, these anti-fascist networks, that would be able to then work together and conspire maybe to change this world for a better, in a more productive fashion than taking on like one Islamophobe at a time kind of thing, or one conspiracy theorist at a time. If we're able to set up a society where people like Boris Johnson or like psychopaths don't have billions of pounds in cash, then there would be much less need for people like you and me now countering the toxicity that feeds through society from top down. And that's what trickle-down economics is. It's a trickle-down of toxicity. There's no money trickling down. All the money trickles up, while the toxic kind of nature of what we see above us, it is trickled down. And it's that projection again.
Yeah, true.
So yeah, you said you had 10 minutes. So have you got anything that you want to leave us on? Any important things to say or remember?
I really enjoyed this conversation. I definitely want to do some more. I think we could take these conversations a bit further. What I'd say to anybody watching this, like, if you want to discuss any of the things that I've been talking about, hit me up on my YouTube, Brent Lee TV. Hit me up on Twitter, Brent Lee TV. Like, let's have a chat. Let's talk it out. Happy to take any messages whatsoever.
Yeah, thanks for having this chat. It's been really interesting. What I was scared of doing was having a chat with someone who's gone from believing in conspiracies to rejecting conspiracies, to then me coming along and saying, hey, but what about the conspiracy that I'm involved in? And then that sending you down a whole other path of conspiracy theory again. But I think, like you said, I think a good way to prevent that from happening is think about it as corruption. Corruption exists, and we can see it in front of us. It's reported on. It's obvious, and there's no conspiracy theory there. It's just fact. And it's the fact that the people that are in control are corrupt, and when they have the power to funnel that corruption downwards, they will do, and we just need to kind of put a stop to that. And because I like to, and I want to get this idea into people's heads, and that it is possible and it is a good idea. Citizens' assemblies are really what I believe is the only solution out of this, if we want it to happen non-violently and productively, and without it being taken over by another type of psychopath or authoritarian.
Yeah. It's going to be hard work, man.
Yeah, but we'll get there, man.
Yeah. It's called progression for a reason, because it will only progress. You know, they've been trying to stop us since the French Revolution. Really.
Exactly.
This is how long they've been trying. 1796 or something is when Abbe Barruel writes the first book that details this entire conspiracy. You know, this is what I'm working on. Like, I'm working on this new video. It will be out in the new year, but it's the history of all of this. And I start off by saying, what if I told you the conspiracy was itself a conspiracy? I know it's exactly.
That's what it is.
A double rabbit hole or whatever. I'm calling
that's the
video is going to be called The Meta Conspiracy. Not about Facebook, but the conspiracy within the conspiracy. They've been pushing.
You can only watch it in the virtual world.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Like, the only conspiracy is the fact that conspiracies are the conspiracy.
Mm-hmm. Mind blown.
It's like, what? Am I in Inception? What layer am I in? Am I gonna wake up from this dream in another dream?
Right, yeah, man. I got a chip. So
no worries, man.
That was
Thanks for having the
so
chat.
cool to chat. And be in touch, yeah? Like, let's do this again.
Absolutely.
Maybe you can pop on my channel and I can ask you.
Yeah, that would be great.
I'll bring you on to talk about politics and stuff like that. I ask you the questions I want to ask.
Yeah, sure. Yeah? That'd be great, yeah.
All right, man.
Cool.
Peace.
Have a good night.
You too.
And everyone else, bye.